My name is Lucia Navarro. I'm 28 years old. For 15 years, my father told the world that I was a liability, a chaotic mess who couldn't be trusted with the family legacy, while my stepbrother, JJ, was doing photo shoots for Bon Appetit magazine and shaking hands with Chicago's billionaire elite. I was banished to the windowless basement of our own restaurant. They mocked my ADHD, called me disorganized, and paid me a fraction of what they paid him. But on the night of the biggest culinary event of the decade, in front of the most powerful food critics in America, a stranger in a tailored suit handed me a manila envelope that would expose every lie my family ever told about me. What they didn't know, Grandma Rosa had been watching. She saw everything. And she left me a document that would burn the Navarro empire to the ground. Navarro's wasn't just a restaurant. It was an institution in Chicago's West Loop, a glittering, glass-walled temple of fine dining that brought in $20 million a year. My father, Chef Julian Navarro, was the king of this castle. He demanded Michelin star precision, military discipline, and absolute perfection. And then there was me. I was diagnosed with severe ADHD when I was 9. To my father, my brain was a defect. My thoughts didn't move in a straight, orderly line. They scattered like hot oil in a pan. He spent thousands on tutors to fix me, to make me normal. He didn't understand that while my bedroom was a disaster and I couldn't sit still in a classroom for 5 minutes, the kitchen was the only place where the chaos made perfect sense. I could track 6 simmering pots at once, mentally calculate the exact acidity of a wine reduction, and intuitively know when a steak was a perfect medium rare just by the sound of the sizzle. My brain didn't need recipes, it needed rhythm. But my father didn't see a prodigy. He saw an embarrassment. When I turned 20, he offered me a job, not upstairs in the gleaming open kitchen where the guests could watch the chefs working like artists. No. He put me in the basement prep kitchen, the dungeon. My salary, $42,000 a year. I spent 14 hours a day breaking down whole pigs, chopping mountains of onions, and doing all the grueling prep work. Meanwhile, my stepbrother, JJ, a culinary school snob whose only real talent was stealing my ideas, was promoted to executive sous chef. His salary, $250,000, plus bonuses. I wasn't allowed to plate the food. I wasn't allowed to speak to the guests, but I watched and I tasted. Last October, a notoriously harsh critic from the Chicago Tribune came in. I had spent 3 weeks down in the basement perfecting a bone marrow demi-glace infused with smoked ancho chilies, a tribute to our Mexican roots. It was complex, earthy, and brilliant. JJ came downstairs, tasted it straight from my pot without a word, poured it into a pristine silver container, and carried it upstairs to serve with his Wagyu beef. When the review came out, the critic called JJ's sauce a culinary revelation. I stood in the alleyway behind the restaurant and reading the article on my phone, breathing in the smell of the dumpsters. My father found me there. I thought finally he would acknowledge what I did. Instead, he just looked at my stained apron, my messy hair, and sighed. "Lucia, look at you," he said, his voice dripping with pity. "You're a mess. JJ has the presentation. He has the poise. You just don't have the discipline for the spotlight. Be grateful you have a place here at all." I was 27, and I believed him. I learned to survive in the shadows. But every Sunday, I'd take the train down to Pilsen to visit my Abuela Rosa. She was the one who actually started it all, selling tamales from a food truck in the 80s before my father gentrified her recipes. She'd sit with me in her cramped apartment, her arthritic hands holding mine. "Mija," she told me once, her dark eyes flashing with a fierce light. "Your father cooks for the ego. You cook for the soul. They can steal your recipes, but they can't steal your fire. You just see things differently. And that is not a disease, sweetheart. That is a gift." 3 years ago, just before she passed away, she handed me a small safety deposit box key. "Keep this," she said. "Don't use it yet. When the time comes, when Julian shows you exactly who he is, you'll know what to do." I kept that key tucked away. For 3 years, I stayed quiet. I let them steal my work. I let them call me chaotic. But then came November 2024. The James Beard Award Committee, the Oscars of the food world, was coming to Chicago. The restaurant was hosting a private 10-course tasting menu for the judges. It was supposed to be JJ's crowning achievement. The night my father officially handed him the keys to the kingdom. But my father had one last piece of business to take care of before the guests arrived. He needed to finally get rid of his embarrassing, chaotic daughter. once and for all. He just didn't realize I wasn't going to go quietly. November 14th, 2024, 4 p.m. The kitchen of Navarro's was a war zone. The James Beard Award judges were arriving in exactly 2 hours. Upstairs, the dining room smelled of fresh lilies and expensive beeswax. And downstairs, in my windowless prep kitchen, it was 100 degrees, smelling of searing meat and raw panic. I had been there since 4 a.m., 14 hours straight. My hands were blistered. I was currently managing 3 massive pots of saffron risotto, perfectly timing the reduction of a blackberry Cabernet glaze, and breaking down 50 pounds of fresh lobster. The chaos was deafening, but my ADHD brain was humming like a perfectly tuned engine. I was in my element. Then, the heavy metal door swung open. My stepbrother, JJ, walked in. He wasn't sweating. His pristine, custom-tailored white chef's coat didn't have a single stain on it. He looked like a model pretending to be a chef. He grabbed a tasting spoon, dipped it into my blackberry glaze, and tasted it. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded. "Put the lobsters on ice," JJ ordered, not even looking at me. "The PR team from Food and Wine magazine is upstairs. They want to film me prepping the seafood course. I'll take it from here." He signaled 2 line cooks to carry my prep stations, my glazes, and my lobsters upstairs into the beautiful glass-walled kitchen. He was going to stand in front of the cameras and pretend he spent the last 14 hours creating the masterpiece I had bled for. I gripped the edge of the stainless steel counter so hard my knuckles turned white, but I didn't say a word. I couldn't. At 5 p.m., my father called a mandatory all-staff meeting in the main dining room. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the 50 employees standing at attention. I stood at the very back, half hidden behind a pillar, still wearing my stained gray prep apron. My father stood at the front, holding a glass of champagne. He looked every bit the culinary king. "Tonight is the culmination of 20 years of work," Julian announced, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "But tonight is also about the future. The James Beard Committee isn't just looking at our food, they are looking at our legacy." He placed a proud, heavy hand on JJ's shoulder, which is why, effective tomorrow morning, Julian Jr. will officially take over as the executive chef and majority stakeholder of the Navarro Restaurant Group. The room erupted into applause. Waiters clapped, sous chef cheered, JJ smiled with practiced, arrogant modesty. Not one person looked at the back of the room. Not one person looked at me. As the staff dispersed to get ready for service, my father caught my eye. He gestured for me to follow him into his private office. His office smelled of expensive leather and arrogant entitlement. He sat behind his massive oak desk and slid a single manila folder toward me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a transfer package," Julian said smoothly. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. He was busy adjusting his Rolex. "We're restructuring the brand, Lucia. JJ is going to be the face of Navarro's. We are expanding to New York and Vegas. We need a polished, disciplined team. And, let's be honest," he finally looked up, and the coldness in his eyes made my stomach drop. "You are too chaotic. Your ADHD makes you unpredictable. You run around the basement like a madwoman. It's an embarrassment to the brand's image." "I do all the prep," I stammered, my chest tightening. "The glaze JJ is serving tonight, I created that. You know I did." My father sighed, the same patronizing sigh he used when I was a struggling 9-year-old. "Lucia, stop. We've spent thousands accommodating your condition. We've kept you on payroll out of pity, but JJ needs a clean slate. You're being transferred to Navarro Catering Logistics." Catering Logistics. It was a freezing warehouse 30 miles outside the city, where they boxed up cheap sandwiches for corporate seminars. "My salary?" I asked, feeling the room spinning. $35,000 a year, he said flatly. "Well, and you'll be off the main property. It's better for you, really, less pressure. You can finally stop trying to be something you're clearly not." He wasn't just firing me, he was erasing me. He was taking my mind, my recipes, my 14-hour days, handing them to his golden child, and locking me in a warehouse so I couldn't ruin their perfect family photo. "The transfer starts Monday. Clean out your locker tonight," Julian said, turning back to his computer. "Close the door on your way out." I walked out of that office completely numb. I walked down the narrow hallway toward the alleyway exit. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses starting upstairs. The VIPs had arrived. JJ was serving my food, my father was taking the credit, and I was being thrown away like garbage. I pushed open the heavy metal back door and stepped into the freezing Chicago alley, the tears finally burning my eyes. If I accepted this, I would spend the rest of my life believing I was broken. But then, I heard a cough. I looked up. Standing in the alley, perfectly dressed in a charcoal suit, ignoring the smell of the dumpsters, was an older man with silver hair and a leather briefcase. "Miss Navarro?" he asked softly. I wiped my face. "Who are you?" He pulled a thick, cream-colored envelope from his coat. The seal was stamped in red wax. "My name is Arthur Cohen," he said, his eyes sharp and steady. "I was your grandmother Rosa's attorney. She left something for you, and she told me to give it to you on the exact day your father tried to throw you away." The freezing Chicago wind howled through the alley, but I didn't feel the cold. I stared at the cream-colored envelope in Arthur Cohen's hands. The wax seal bore the crest of his law firm. "My grandmother died 3 years ago," I said, my voice shaking. "Why are you here now?" Mr. Cohen didn't flinch. "Because your grandmother knew her son, Miss Navarro. She knew Julian's ego would eventually outgrow his sense of family. She instructed me to hold this trust in escrow until the day he attempted to terminate your employment or force you out of the primary business." He glanced at the heavy metal door behind me, where the muffled sounds of the James Beard dinner were vibrating through the brick. "I have sources inside the restaurant," Cohen continued smoothly. "I know about the transfer to catering logistics. The condition has been met." He held out the envelope. "Open it, Lucia." My blistered hands trembled as I broke the red wax seal. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents. The header read, "The Rosa Navarro Irrevocable Living Trust." "I don't understand legal jargon, Mr. Cohen. My brain doesn't process this," I whispered, the words swimming on the page. "You don't need to read the fine print. I will translate it for you," Cohen said, his voice softening just a fraction. "Your father believes he built this empire, but he only built the menu. When Rosa started her food truck, she bought the empty lot this restaurant sits on for pennies in 1988. As the neighborhood gentrified, she bought the buildings for your other 2 locations as well." I looked up at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Julian owns the LLC that operates the restaurant," Cohen explained, a sharp, almost predatory smile touching his lips. "But your grandmother never transferred the physical real estate to him, nor did she give him the trademark to the Navarro name. She put it all in a blind trust." He tapped the document in my hands. "As of 5 p.m. today, when your father handed you that transfer notice, that trust activated. You, Lucia Navarro, are now the sole owner of the West Loop building, the River North building, and the trademark rights to the Navarro brand. The total asset value is estimated at $32 million. The alley started to spin. 32 million? The building? The name? "Wait," I choked out. "If I own the buildings and the name, then Chef Julian Navarro is currently operating his business inside your property, using your trademarked name without a lease," Cohen finished. "Your grandmother saw how they treated you. She knew they stole your recipes and mocked your mind. She couldn't protect you while she was alive, but she made sure she gave you the ultimate leverage when you needed it most." I stared at the brick wall of the restaurant. Inside that building, JJ was taking photos with food critics. My father was pouring champagne, basking in the glory of the empire he thought was his. They thought they had just erased me. They thought I was going to pack up my knives, go home, and cry. "There is a condition," Cohen said, pulling me back to reality. "To solidify the transfer, you must formally evict the current tenant or renegotiate the lease within 48 hours. If you walk away tonight, the trust dissolves and goes to charity." 48 hours, I repeated. "You can take the weekend to think about it," Cohen suggested. "We can send a formal cease and desist to Julian's lawyers on Monday morning." I looked down at my stained gray apron, the apron of the ghost in the basement, the apron of the girl who was too chaotic, too messy, too broken to be seen. I thought about the 14 hours I spent making that blackberry glaze. I thought about the thousands of hours I spent believing I was worthless just because I didn't fit their mold. A new feeling ignited in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was pure, blazing focus. The chaos in my brain suddenly sharpened into a single, crystal-clear line. No," I said. I reached up and untied the knot of my greasy apron, letting it fall to the filthy alley floor. Underneath, I was wearing a simple, sharp black turtleneck and dark slacks. "I'm not waiting until Monday, Mr. Cohen," I said. looking him dead in the eye. Do you have your briefcase? Good, because we are going inside right now. Cohen raised an eyebrow. Right now? Miss Navarro, the James Beard Committee is in the middle of their tasting menu. I know, I said, grabbing the heavy metal handle of the kitchen door. Julian told me to clean out my locker, but I think I'm going to clean house instead. I walked up the 13 concrete steps from the basement prep dungeon for the last time. Mr. Cohen was right behind me, his leather shoes clicking softly on the stairs. With every step, the air changed. The smell of oxidized grease and sweat faded, replaced by the scents of expensive beeswax candles, fresh Peruvian lilies, and Guerlain perfume. I pushed open the swinging door that separated the back of house from the stage. The dining room of Navarro's was a cathedral of glass and polished dark wood, and center stage was the open kitchen, glowing under heat lamps like an operating theater. 50 VIP guests, including the entire James Beard judging panel and the critics who had called JJ a revelation, were watching the show, but the show was falling apart. I stopped in the shadows just outside the kitchen's glass perimeter. JJ was at the pass, and he was drowning. He was sweating through his pristine whites. He was trying to finish the dish, seared duck breast with my blackberry Cabernet glaze. But he didn't know the timing. He didn't know the heat. It's breaking, JJ hissed at a line cook, his voice cracking with panic. He was furiously whisking the glaze, but the emulsion had separated. It looked like greasy purple sludge. More butter. Get me more cold butter. The lead critic from the Tribune, seated at the chef's table 3 feet away, lowered his wine glass. He noticed. They all noticed. My father, Julian, saw the disaster happening. He immediately turned on his charming restaurateur smile and started walking toward the critics' table to run interference, to distract them with expensive wine while his golden child melted down. That was my moment. I stepped out of the shadows and crossed the threshold into the gleaming open kitchen. I wasn't wearing chef's whites. I was in severe black, standing out like a dark smudge in their sterile, bright world. The visual impact was instant. The kitchen staff froze. A waiter dropped a fork. Julian spun around. When he saw me, his face went a color I'd never seen before, a mix of fury and terrified confusion. Lucia, he hissed, keeping his voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. He grabbed my elbow, his grip painful. What the hell are you doing up here? Get back to the basement. You're having an episode. You're embarrassing me. He tried to shove me toward the exit. A week ago, I would have let him. A week ago, I would have believed I was the crazy one. I yanked my arm out of his grip. I didn't yell. My voice was dead calm, cutting through the kitchen clatter like a freshly honed Japanese steel knife. Don't touch me, Julian. JJ looked up from his ruined sauce, his eyes wide. Lucia, get out of here. Security. I walked right past my father. I walked right past JJ. I stood directly in front of the pass, under the heat lamps, facing the 50 most powerful people in the culinary world. I placed both hands flat on the stainless steel counter. Stop service, I commanded. The kitchen went deathly silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerators. My father looked like he was having a stroke. He marched toward me, abandoning all pretense of charm. You are fired. Get out of my restaurant before I have you dragged out in handcuffs. Mr. Cohen stepped out from behind me. He calmly placed his leather briefcase on the counter, right next to JJ's broken sauce. He clicked the latches open. The sound echoed in the silence. Actually, Mr. Navarro, Cohen said, his voice smooth and lethal, she can't be fired, and it's not your restaurant. He pulled out the deed. He pulled out the trademark registration. He laid them out under the bright lights for everyone to see. Julian stared at the documents. He recognized his mother's signature. He recognized the address. I looked at my father, then at JJ shivering in his sweat-stained chef coat. I finally understood what Abuela Rosa meant. I wasn't chaotic. I was just the only one not playing their game. You told me to clean out my locker, Dad, I said, my voice ringing clear through the dining room. But I realized something. Why should I leave? I tapped the deed with my index finger. I own the building. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. For a terrifying, suspended second, Julian stared at the deed. Then, true to his nature, he tried to spin it. He let out a loud, forced laugh that echoed off the glass walls. He turned to the James Beard judges and the PR team. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry for this interruption, Julian said, his voice dripping with practiced paternal sympathy. My daughter, Lucia, she struggles with severe psychiatric issues. She's having a manic episode, Please, enjoy your wine. Security will escort her to a hospital. He reached for my arm again. I didn't move. I just looked at Mr. Cohen. Cohen adjusted his glasses and looked right at the lead critic from the Chicago Tribune. I am Arthur Cohen, managing partner at Cohen and Vance. I assure you, Miss Navarro's mental health is pristine, unlike Chef Julian's lease agreement, which does not exist. Cohen turned to my father and handed him a separate, heavy document. Julian Navarro, you are operating a commercial enterprise on private property without a valid lease. Furthermore, you are utilizing the trademark name Navarro, which you do not own. You have formally been served with a cease and desist and an immediate notice of eviction. Julian's fake smile finally shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking hollow and old. Arthur, you can't do this. I'm her father. I built this place. You built a menu, I interrupted, my voice finally rising, echoing across the dining room. A menu you didn't even write. I walked over to JJ's prep station. JJ backed away from me like I was radioactive. Like I looked down at the ruined, greasy purple sludge in his pan. Then I looked directly at the James Beard judges. He broke the emulsion, I said clearly. He didn't know that you have to drop the heat to a simmer before folding in the cold butter. The ancho chilies hold too much residual oil. If you rush it, it separates. I picked up a tasting spoon, tapped it against the pan, and dropped it into the sink with a loud clang. He didn't know that, I continued, because he didn't write the recipe. He didn't spend 3 weeks perfecting it. I did. In the basement prep kitchen, where my father hid me for 8 years because my ADHD was an embarrassment to his pristine image. The PR team from Food and Wine wasn't eating anymore. They had their phones out. They were recording everything. JJ looked like he was going to throw up. Dad, do something, he hissed. Julian stepped forward, his voice finally dropping the facade. It was pure venom now. You ungrateful little brat. If you do this, you destroy the business. You destroy the legacy. You don't know how to run a restaurant. I don't want to run your restaurant, Julian, I said, staring him down. I'm closing it. The collective gasp from the dining room was music to my ears. Effective immediately, Navarro's is permanently closed, I announced. I pointed to the heavy wooden doors at the front of the restaurant. I want you both out of my kitchen, and take off the chef coats. You don't have the right to wear my grandmother's name anymore. For a moment, I thought Julian was going to strike me. His fists were clenched, his breathing ragged. But he looked around. He looked at the cameras, the critics, the wealthy investors who had backed him. He saw the exact moment his reputation evaporated. He wasn't the brilliant Chef Navarro anymore. He was a fraud who stole from his own daughter. Without a word, Julian ripped off his white chef coat, threw it on the pristine floor, and walked out the back door into the alley. JJ, practically crying, scrambled after him. They left with absolutely nothing. 6 months later, if you walk down the West Loop in Chicago today, you won't find a place called Navarro's. You'll find a restaurant with a line out the door, a warm, vibrant dining room, and a massive open kitchen where the music is loud and the energy is pure, controlled chaos. The sign above the door simply says, Rosa's. I didn't fire the staff. I gave them raises. The basement prep dungeon is now a storage room because I moved the prep stations upstairs. Every cook, every dishwasher, every sous chef works in the light. Last month, the Chicago Tribune reviewed Rosa's. They gave it 4 stars. The review didn't mention Julian, who's currently managing a mid-tier steakhouse in the suburbs, or JJ, who quit cooking entirely to become a lifestyle influencer. The review only talked about the food. It called the menu brilliantly chaotic, deeply emotional, and fiercely original. My ADHD didn't disappear. My brain still scatters like hot oil, but I don't apologize for it anymore. It's the secret ingredient that built my empire. Abuela Rosa was right. They could steal my recipes, but they could never steal my fire. I'm going to pause here. If you are listening to this and you've ever been told that you are too loud, too messy, or too broken to succeed, I want you to remember something. The people who try to hide you in the basement are usually the ones who are terrified of what you could do if you ever stepped into the light. Don't let them convince you that your differences are defects. Your chaos might just be the exact thing that makes you brilliant. If my story resonated with you, if you love seeing narcissists get exactly what they deserve, drop a comment below and type, "clean house." Let me know I'm not alone. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening. Keep your fire burning. I'll see you in the next story.